Thank you. Guten Morgen, good morning, bonjour, everyone. I'm Jean-Philippe Desmartin. Thank you, Friedrich and Frank, for the introduction. Thank you for the Austrian National Bank to host us today here at the heart of Europe. We're going to start directly. I'm happy to welcome and introduce Patrick de Cambourg, who is online this morning. Thank you, Patrick de Cambourg, because we know that he has presently a very busy agenda, so thank you for the minutes that we can have with him. Patrick has a long and successful experience and career in the private sector, but also important responsibilities for the public sector, especially in France, where he heads such an example, the French accounting authorities. But today he speaks in the name of EFRAG, and he is currently a member of the EFRAG Sustainability Reporting Board. But I do consider, and a lot of people do consider, that he is really the key person today to discuss and comment all ESG and sustainable reporting for EU, but also discussion that will be at the heart of the discussion. I mean, the question of what we do, the development in the EU, but also other initiatives outside of Europe, such as ISSB, but also we see development in the US with SEC, dealing with, for instance, climate change, but also human capital. The name of this first session, the title, the theme is Global Sustainability Reporting Standards, ISSB EFRAG, the way going forward to converge, with, of course, a question. Patrick, as a start, I let you the floor to develop the first point, which is very important right now, and of 2022. Where are we now for today, for the next month, for also 2023, regarding the different EFRAG ESG calendars, such as CSRD? Thank you, Patrick.
Good morning to all. I hope you hear me well. Do you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much for inviting me and to this very interesting program. I am honored to have the opportunity to express the views regarding the EU and also the convergence between the EU and other initiatives. So maybe to start with a quick reminder of the CSRD main features. Really what is at stake, if you read carefully, is a serious ambition to meet the challenge of sustainability reporting data. Quality is at the heart of the CSRD. So it's a step that has been decided by the European institutions to hand up the fragmentation of and the poor quality of information related to sustainability matters. The key features, as you may know, are that it establishes a mandatory regime of reporting which will apply to all large entities. And as we know in the EU, the definition of large entities is broad because the threshold, if I take the number of employees, to become a large entity is 250. So it represents roughly about half of the GDP in the EU. So it's very important. In addition, by the way, SMEs, so entities that are below that threshold, will be encouraged to adopt a voluntary system. Not mentioning, of course, the listed SMEs that will have to comply with the simplified regime. So this is very, the scope of the mandatory regime is key. The second key feature is that, beyond the principles that are established by the directive, we are talking about a reporting that has to be prepared in accordance with standards to be elaborated by EFRAG to be transmitted to the Commission as technical advice, and then the Commission will have to follow a process to transform that into delegated acts. Delegated acts means that it is applicable throughout the Union without transposition at member state level. So that's absolutely key. I should mention that in the concepts that are established, there are many conceptual elements that are key in the CSRD, so the legislative level. But I should mention at least one, which is double materiality. It means that you need not only to assess what are the risks for the entity, risks and opportunities for the entity, but also the impacts of the entity on environment and people. And that's where, when we will have the opportunity to discuss, this is one of the possible differences with other initiatives. The third feature which I would like to mention is that clearly there is a key willingness to have quality. So the directive is stating that the information should be relevant, faithful, comparable, understandable, and verifiable. By the way, those qualities match the qualities which are required from financial reporting. So the overall idea is to create a system which would be operational on an equal footing with financial reporting. So I sometimes say that financial reporting and sustainability reporting should ultimately be the two legs on which standardized corporate reporting would be able to walk harmoniously. Another and the fourth feature which I would like to mention is that there is a phased-in implementation that is organized by the level one, by the CSRD. The reporting will take place first for the NFRD companies, the companies that are already in the scope of sustainability reporting in 2024. And then step by step, the rest of the scope and the SMEs that on a voluntary basis will be expected to either comply with or consider reporting their sustainability reporting. And fifth, and not last, but I will stop there on the key features of the CSRD, the information will be audited. And that's key because, you know, that is creating clearly also the equal footing we are trying to, that is contemplated for sustainability reporting. It means, by the way, that has been organized in two steps. First step is limited assurance, and then moving to reasonable assurance. In technical terms, reasonable assurance is what auditors do for financial reporting, but in between, an interim step has been organized, which is limited assurance, which means that, you know, there will not be a full audit of the KPIs, for instance, but the key principles and the processes will have to be reviewed, and an opinion will have to be expressed by the auditor on the quality of the information that is provided by the company. By the way, when we, in the CSRD, I would like to mention with a big smile that sometimes we say reporting entity in standard setting. The directive is talking about undertaking. Okay, so in that, so as you know, the directive has been adopted following the trilogue on June 21st, 2022. And it's not yet in the legal acts because, you know, you have a number of steps to be carried out, like, you know, making sure the translation is okay. Also, you know, there is a legal verification, but that should come very shortly. But the text is now stabilized, absolutely stabilized since June 21st. Since, as I mentioned, I'm going to move to EFRAG now. Since, as I explained, the CSRD is saying that you need to comply with the principles in the law in the CSRD, but you also will have to comply. I mean, entities will have to comply with standards, because standards are a key pillar of proper reporting. As we may know, we have the same in financial reporting. We have directive and we have standards. So, and that was the decision that the Commission took early 2020, following the announcement of the Green Deal, that said it's time to solve the challenge of data, and we need to have not only a revised directive, but also a robust set of standards. So the Commission asked EFRAG to start working on standards as soon as September 2020, so 2 years ago. And in a first phase, which I will not elaborate on for too long, we produced recommendations on the principle that should be followed to have a robust system. That finished in February 2021. And then the Commission, which finalized its proposal, which is now fully adopted, the Commission realized that drafting standards is an exercise that takes time. So they requested EFRAG to start elaborating standards as early as the end of May 2021. So 15 or 16 months ago. So we reinitiated the task force that had been established in September 2020. It's a multi-stakeholder project task force that has been working very hard, and which has led to, the adoption of exposure drafts at the end of April 2022. So the output of the project task force, which I had the honor to chair, is 13 standards covering the various topics in the CSRD, which I did not mention, but I'm sure that you are aware. So environmental, social, and governance. So 13 standards in all. One which is a generic standard called ESRS1, and then 12 covering, the transversal disclosures, ESRS2, and then 6 topical environmental standards, 4 topical social standards, and 2 topical governance standards. In that respect, so we ended up with a proposal. I can tell you that it was a real challenge, because drafting standards in so short a period of time is not always easy. And people worked very hard, and most of them under contributions in kind as members or as contribution for major initiatives around the EU. So, by the way, I express my gratitude to all the people that provided a huge effort. You will hear one of them later today, my friend Alex Basson. So public consultation was launched at the end of April until August 8. At the same time, EFRAG had reformed its constitution to organize the second pillar. We had one financial pillar, now we have a sustainability reporting pillar that is about to be finalized because the members are operational since the beginning of March, maybe end of Feb. It was beginning of March or mid-March, and they gave the green light to organize the public consultation on the basis of the exposure drafts prepared by the task force. And the only point that is missing today is the chair, because the chair has to be proposed by the Commission following, you know, a serious process that involves consultation with the European Parliament and also with the Council. This is underway as we speak. So consultation has taken place. And now, as you may imagine, we received about 450 responses. They are extremely voluminous because the consultation itself was voluminous. So we are trying to address and modify the exposure drafts to transform them into standards. We are trying to take on board in the most open manner all the comments that we received. There is statistical evidence because there were statistical questions, but more importantly, there are many comments that have been done by, you know, European stakeholders and also worldwide stakeholders. We have 12% of respondents that are not EU headquartered. So this is a process that is underway, and as an example, we had 3 days this week of meeting for the Sustainability Reporting Board to address on a one-by-one basis the most important comments that we received from the consultation. The goal is to reach an agreement at ESRS and EFRAG level in the course of November, because due to the directive timetable, which is fixed, the Commission needs to have the delegated acts adopted for 2024 no later than June 2023. And in order to perform their own process, which I will mention in a minute, they need EFRAG to deliver its technical advice, i.e. the elaborated draft standards, by November. Why does it take 7 months at Commission level? Because they are, by CSRD, required to consult formally 8 public institutions in the EU, including ECB, ESMA, EBA, EIOPA, etc. Formally. 2, they will need to translate the text, which is produced in English, in the 24 languages of the Union. And last but not least, they need to give the scrutiny period to Parliament and Council for a no objection. And that's why we are under very severe constraints in terms of timing. I would say to finish on this first quick overview, I would say that the consultation is not a blessing, it's not a rejection either. It's extremely encouraging, but it shows that we have to improve on a number of requirements. In addition, I think there is a crucial point that has to be considered both from a technical and also from a political standpoint, which is, you know, what kind of, you know, even if we agree on the ultimate goal in terms of reporting, there are different views that are possible regarding the pace of implementation. And we have at standard setting level a number of tools like, you know, other sets of standards are contemplated. So you can say this topic would be addressed in a second step or in a third step. We have also the possibility to adopt a standard and a requirement, but say it is applicable with a deferral of 2 years with early application or not, etc. So this is to be considered. That's what we call the phasing in options. So our work is on the one side to make sure that the reporting is relevant and is offering users the right level of information. But on the other hand, we also have, on the basis of a cost-benefit analysis that has been outsourced to a reputable organization in the EU. We also have to consider a reasonable implementation path, because it's a game-changing step. So we will have to fine-tune the amount which is requested day one and what will be requested over a reasonable period following that day one.
Thank you.
So Jean-Philippe, it's a summary
that
maybe a little too long.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. And we clearly understand that we are in the game-changing period here in Europe. I must precise that EFFAS was part of the consultation. We did a task force with some people coming from our ESG commission, but also people coming from another commission, accounting one, in order to be completely balanced. And I mean, working with the two legs, finance and sustainability. So we understand all a strong dynamic here in Europe, but also, and this is a positive news, there are also initiatives outside of Europe. And I think you all heard about ISSB, but also SEC in the US is moving. I was saying, especially regarding climate change and human capital. But perhaps, Patrick, you will quote other initiatives, but this is an important point, because here we do represent practitioners coming from corporates and financial markets. And of course, we invest in Europe, but also outside Europe. And really one question is, are we going to have convergence and optimizations of all sustainability reporting? That's really one of the key questions that a lot of practitioners have. So I'll let you the floor with that question.
Thank you, Jean-Philippe. There are technical aspects and there are also political aspects, and I will refrain from commenting on the quote-unquote more political aspects. What I can say is that from day one, Executive Vice President Dombrovskis said it from the start back in January 2020. We repeatedly said it also. EFRAG and the EU are absolutely keen to build on what is done at global level and also to contribute to that momentum. From a global standpoint, of course, the EU is in a front-running position. And there is always the risk to be isolated because you are too ambitious. But on the other hand, you have the other risk, which is, in order to be global, to align on the lowest common denominator. And that's the dilemma, I suspect, that most of our, political decision makers are being confronted with and are confronted with. And of course, this has a consequence on the technical aspects. So more importantly, from a technical standpoint, we, and I think that you can testify, Jean-Philippe, try to establish cooperation arrangements with all the existing initiatives. So, for instance, we had early on, and we have, a relationship with a Global Reporting Initiative, because Global Reporting Initiative is historically the organization that has been focusing on impacts and disclosure related to impacts. And the system is adopted by a significant number of reporting entities throughout the EU, but also worldwide. So we have a great cooperation with those guys. We also established, and I would like to mention this, Jean-Philippe, because I know you are committed, with Wiki on intangibles, and with Shift on human rights. As regards the ISSB, remember, when we started, the ISSB was not created because the decision to create the ISSB was taken at the end of 2021, with the chair being appointed in December 2021. Before that, we had what we call the Technical Readiness Working Group, from the IFRS Foundation, with which we had meetings. So we entertain a dialogue with all those organizations, with the SEC also, but as you know, the tradition of the SEC is a bit different. So I can say that from an EFRAG perspective, there is absolute openness to discuss the steps forward. When if I take GRI, GRI was part of our working groups and produced a long document on our exposure drafts to suggest improvements and try to align better. This is considered, as we speak, I don't see a big challenge. As regards intangibles, I think for me, this is a personal view, this is probably something that is underdeveloped as we speak in the exposure draft and maybe in the CSRD as well, but that will come with time. It's more difficult to standardize, quite frankly, but it can be done, but it will take time. As regards the SEC, the SEC has produced at this stage one paper on climate, and as you know, the setup is different because SEC is not a standard setter per se. It's a market supervisor, financial markets supervisor, and therefore they have to work within the confines of their mandate. So their mandate is to operate on financial reporting and risks. So sometimes when you read carefully, you see that the limitations by law of their mandate is creating something that is a bit different, but not that different. At the end of the day, when you have a look at substance, I personally think we are not far apart, quite frankly. As regards the ISSB, we have a constant dialogue. I speak to the chair this afternoon, Emmanuel Faber. So as an example, so there is a constant dialogue, and we have technical meetings and also more strategic meetings, because of course we need to see where the two organizations are going, the EU/EFRAG on the one side and the ISSB on the other side. The ISSB is having his first board meeting, complete board meeting. I think it was this week or next week. So they had to move quickly and organize themselves by the same token. They have produced two standards. One, S1, which is a general requirements and if I may say so, a framework that is relatively general, but that is also to the point. Under one clear perspective, that might be a differentiation with the EU. I say might be because sometimes it's difficult to see what are the practical consequences. Their objective is to address investor relevance and enterprise value. So in that, you are confronted with a difficult question, which is to say, what are the impacts that are investor relevant and what are the impacts that are not investor relevant or enterprise value relevant? And this is precisely one of the discussions we have from a conceptual standpoint. Is it possible to make a distinction between two categories of impacts, the ones that have an impact on enterprise value and others that would have no impact, foreseeable impacts? Okay. So let me just one word on climate, because it's important. On climate, they have a second standard called S2. we are compared, we had the draft when we drafted ours, and they had ours when they drafted their draft. So I personally believe that, yes, there are areas for improvement, but at this stage, in substance, I think we are highly compatible. Of course, with the difference on the the different perspective, double materiality on the one side and enterprise value perspective on the other side. This is my assessment, but I'm happy to elaborate more whenever.
Thank you, Patrick. As a short conclusions, when we see the development with EFRAG, ISSB and SEC, we can be, I would say, relatively confident regarding the way all people move towards climate change, which is one urgency. So that's a good piece of information, especially because everyone globally recognizes TCFD framework.
Yes, I wanted to mention that.
That's
you
a
know,
common umbrella, if I may say. And
yes,
that's
yes.
a positive input we can have now. I move to the last point and question before opening for the last minutes Q&A session, and I hope that we will have some feedback from the room and online. You emphasize the main difference today regarding ISB and plus SEC, I think we can say that, and EFRAG, which is double materiality. Are there other key aspects when you have in mind today the big differences you see in practice in addition to double materiality?
Frank, well, you know, for climate anyway, I think that the difference is minimal. Why? Because if you have a look at TCFD, and if you have a look as a consequence to the way it's been translated into S2 IFRS or E1, which is EFRAG, you see that in fact impact is extremely is at the starting point of the disclosures. So you know, from a very practical standpoint on climate, due to the importance of impacts, you know, what we call the inside-out relationship. So what the entity is creating for the environment. I think that there are not that many differences. Now, it might be more difficult for the other ones, but for the time being, my assessment is that due to the TCFD umbrella, I don't see a major difference. That, of course, is in substance. There are nevertheless some details that we are discussing. There are detailed discussions, like, do you want to report greenhouse gas emissions net or gross? How do you address offsets? What should be disclosed on transition plans? Because in the EU we have policies regarding transitions, because there are clear objectives that are stated by policies in the EU. While, of course, when you are the ISSB, you operate in a multi-jurisdictional environment, and as a consequence, you cannot mandate entities in China to adopt the objectives of the EU if they have not adopted objectives. So, you know, there are good reasons for some differences, and we are trying to reduce them to the minimum extent possible.
Thank you very much. I'm going now for the last minute, open the floor for Q&A session. I start with the people present here, physically, in person, who've done the effort to be present, so thank you. Is there some question? Because I see already some question online, but if you have one big hot potato, or not hot potato. No? Okay, anyway, I see online two questions. I tried to summarize the first one. I mean, for you, of course, Patrick, because of double materiality, don't you consider that we could see a hyperinflation in terms of data reporting and perhaps sometimes an irrelevant one? Because inflation of stakeholders, etc., etc., etc.
You know, first of all, I should say that the key point in the CSRD, but even more in a more detailed manner in the ESRS, I forgot to mention the nickname of our standards are called ESRS, European Sustainability Reporting Standards. So hyperinflation, I don't think so, because you know both, for instance, the ISSB and ourselves and the CSRD say you don't disclose aspects that are immaterial. So the key element in the approach is, you know, the performance by the entity of an assessment of its material impacts, risks, and opportunities. Of course, there might be requests from stakeholders, but they always have to be considered with through the lens of materiality. And for me, so you know, I don't know. Relevance is a very difficult concept because relevant for whom, you know. So I suspect that the question was, is it relevant for investors, and is there a risk that the information be obscured by too many nitty-gritty information that would be relevant for one stakeholder somewhere? I think it's a matter of judgment, and that we will take a balanced approach to that. So I would be relatively reassuring on the risk of hyperinflation of data. At the moment, we are certainly not in that space. So maybe we do not, you know, operate under a pendulum from too little to too much.
Thank you, Patrick. I see a second question, which is in line with the discussion of convergent cooperation discussion with ISSB and with very concrete questions. Could we think that we will avoid double reporting? Because, of course, that's a potential nightmare for corporates and investors, but that's something we have for the financial reporting, so open debate.
Oh, no. You know, for us, the objective is certainly not to have a double reporting. and you know, we need to avoid that at all cost. When I had the opportunity to express my views in front of the European Parliament, I stated that as a you know, a cornerstone principle. You know, no double reporting. Now, of course, we need to be close enough because you know, it sometimes you have to understand that it's not easy to shoot at a moving target, because we don't know. On climate, I'm confident. You know, I'm confident that we can reach, you know, compatibility. So the minimum we can do is to align on what is absolutely common, which should represent maybe under the circumstances and the TCFD umbrella, I'd say 90% of what has to be reported. Now, if European entities have to add a number of details which are not in contradiction with the ISSB, I don't see why they would have to produce a separate report. It would only be a more detailed report on certain aspects. For the other topics, we don't know, because we don't know yet what are the topics that the ISSB will address next. So double reporting for us is a no-go. So for sure. Now, of course, we are not in the boots of the SEC, so we need to see what is their position. They have asked the question about accepting ISSB as an acceptable reporting for foreign registrants. So let's assume that ESRS and ISSB on climate are aligned and equivalent. I think that would also pave the way to that equivalence, if it is confirmed by the SEC. Now, one last word. We're always talking about human readable reporting, but most people use machine readable reporting. So the digitization is a key element, and I am a great fan of what I call multi-tagging. So when a specific element is in substance equivalent under ISSB, ESRS, and SEC, I would call that, I would put 3 tags on it. So one that would allow an SEC reading, one that would allow an ISSB reading, and the other one that would allow an ASRS reading. And therefore, it wouldn't be confusing. It wouldn't be multi-reporting, it would be multi-tagging.
Thank you, Patrick. So we are completely on time for ending this introduction. Thank you very much, Patrick. And we're going to continue with other exciting discussion and thematic. Thank you, Patrick de Cambourg. Talk to you soon.
So thank you to you for the invitation, and have a great meeting. Bye-bye.
I'm going to let the floor to Frank to continue with the first roundtable right now. Thank you.